Welcome to the Super Gamer Podcast. Welcome to the new Super Gamer Podcast, episode 176. Our guest this week is a writer of books and video games and short stories, and a translator, an editor, a podcaster. We have Falko Loeffler. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we'll start with you. You've been fascinated. You're really into like adventure games. It's not exclusively what you do, obviously, but you were fascinated with interactive storytelling. Since you were a little kid, you discovered text adventures on the C64. Do you remember what games it was that really hooked you in the genre?
Yeah, I still have them right behind me in my office. I was one of these nerdy guys who actually bought Infocom games, like, you know, the big boxes with the many feelies in there. So you could prop them up at your Commodore 64, like business cards and maps and stuff like that. And then you entered into this text world, while every one of my friends was playing like shooting games, racing games. I was playing English text games at age 14 and learning English the hard way. So Border Zone was one that really fascinated me to a big extent, because for those who do not know this game, I mean, Infocom did about 30 text adventures, and Border Zone was the one text adventure with real-time elements. So when you were not typing in anything, the game was still progressing in the meantime, and text might pop up like things happening, and the faster you were able to type, the better you were in this game, of course. And that was fascinating to me. And I have a few of these text adventures here in my office. I bought Stationfall, I bought The Lurking Horror, and of course, The Hitchhiker's Guide by Douglas Adams. And those were the first few text adventures that really hooked me. But of course, I mean, being in Germany, you play adventure games of all kinds, especially the Lucasfilm games. They were translated into German from the very beginning, so they reached a wider audience than Infocom titles and other text adventures or other graphic adventures like the Sierra games. They were never translated into German. So yeah, that was my and we already have shown how old I am. I was born in 74, and we got a Commodore 64 in the 80s. My father bought one, and then I bought an Amiga 500, and yeah, now we're on PC, of course. But yeah, I mean, I've been playing from my teenage years on.
The Hitchhikers, I'll have to check that out, because actually that's my favorite book. And I knew that that Douglas Adams had made several, you know, there's a radio play, a TV show, a movie, all that. And he had said something along the lines of each one needs to be written slightly differently, you know, to fit its medium. So I should definitely try to check that game out, because I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh, if you have never played that, you're in for a treat. Douglas Adams did this one with Steve Meretzky, legendary writer and game designer, and they really expanded on the book. Like, they did not just retell the story that we all know from The Hitchhiker, they implemented some of the craziest puzzles you have ever seen. And you won't, I'm pretty sure you won't be able to solve this thing without a walkthrough. I mean, there are like 4-dimensional puzzles where you have to do things in the exact order that you can't possibly remember on your first try. Otherwise, the whole universe implodes. And there is one, and am I allowed to spoil you a little bit about the puzzles? I love this. You start the game with an inventory that consists of one item, an item that is called no tea. You're British, of course. So having no tea in your inventory is not that great. And there is a door that you have to open, a door with artificial intelligence, and you have to show this door a paradoxon. So on the starship, you can make tea at one point in time. So you have two things in your inventory, tea and no tea. And you show both of these items to the door, and the door implodes and opens up, like, because this paradoxon, it can't handle this. And that's the kind of thinking you have to get into to solve this game. It's impossible to play through without a walkthrough, I guess.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, yeah, I'll definitely have to. I'm sure I can find an emulator or something.
Yeah, of course. Infocom Text Adventures have this C machine, this virtual machine. You just need the game file itself. I'm pretty sure it's easy to find. And myself, I bought a collection of all Infocom Adventures at one point, and I keep transferring those Z files on every new computer that I have. And we're talking about kilobytes of data, not even megabytes. So I always have all the Infocom titles on my PC available, and there are freeware emulators for these old text adventures for these C machines. And I mean, there is still a group of people dedicated to preserving all these classic text adventures and updating these C machine interpreters and so on. So these games surely live on. It's the niche of a niche, but it's good to see that they still exist.
You mentioned the Amiga 500 a little ways back there, and more than 5 years ago, so you've been writing most of your life. More than 5 years ago, you tossed out a big stack of early work you had. It was written on the Amiga 500. Was that an emotional time for you? Like, what does it feel like to purge, all this early writing? I know you did back it up, though.
Yeah, I still have all these backups of my Amiga discs with all the texts that I wrote in my youth. And I did a small... Yeah, I mean, purge is a big word. Going through these texts feels like they were written by a different person. But I mean, that was 30, almost 40 years ago. So, yeah, it's hard to go through these texts sometimes. And I take comfort in the fact that I still have these texts. It's not like some long-lost notebooks that were really important to me at one time, but I still have them on my disk. And that's it. I'm not looking through them anymore, but I know I have them.
Why do if you're not looking through them anymore, like, why do you want to keep them?
Because I take comfort in the fact that they still are there. If I really, one time in my life, I may want to check what have I written back then, and then I can still open these TXT files and look through them. That's good. That's a good feeling. But I don't. It's also a strange thing. Like, on the one hand, you see how much you've progressed as a writer. On the other hand, you see how naive you were back then.
You say in your FAQ on your website that there weren't any game. Now, to be fair, I should tell everyone. So before we started recording here, you had mentioned you've never done a full English podcast before, and I don't speak German, and a lot of your writing and all of your podcasts are in German. So I am translating here. So hopefully there's not. Google is translating, I should say. Hopefully there's not big errors. But anyway, on your FAQ, you say that there weren't games writing courses available when you were coming up in the industry, but now there are. Do you think that for aspiring games writers, like, is that something you'd recommend? Should you get into those courses, or is there another route to take?
I think the situation is special in Germany. I'm not sure about Canada, but if you think about America, university always costs money. So if you want to attend a university, you have to pay, you have to go into debt. And in Germany, that's different. There are universities that you can just qualify for with your high school diploma, essentially, and then you're attending university, and that's it. There are private universities, of course, as well. And the game writing courses and game design courses in Germany almost exclusively are at those private schools. And I'm not sure, my daughter is 15 years old, and she is a creative person. She may want to sign up to one of these universities sometime in the future. And I'm not sure if I would recommend this to her, like taking up debt to attend one of these private game writing, game design universities, or rather study something more general at a state university that does not put you that much into debt. So the courses are very specialized, and in fact, I've been giving lectures at some of these universities, and it's really impressive how creative some of these students are, and the technical things that they have there for the courses. But I guess when I was a teenager or coming out of school, I would have loved to attend one of these universities, but I'm really not sure if it's the best way to go into the industry. Back then, we were talking about the 90s and even the 80s perhaps, but I graduated early 90s. I had to learn this stuff all by myself and thus qualify for doing stuff in the industry. Whereas today you can just attend school and then decide to go into the games industry and then start to learn stuff, which is good. But it also takes a bit away the experiences that you can collect on your own. So I'm a bit divided about this topic. Would I recommend my daughter to attend these schools, these universities? I am not sure. I mean, I still have a few years to decide, and she has to decide, of course. But it's good to see that there are more options out there. But I think it's the games industry, at least in Germany, there are many self-taught people who have not attended a specialized university. They were just starting out as kids and they kept going. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are these professionals or not? It depends on the individuals, I guess.
And at what point of an aspiring writer or freelancer's career should they, as you put it, learn arrogance? Is that something you should have right off the hop, or do you need to kind of earn your arrogance?
I know what you're referring to. These FAQs that I have on my homepage, they are about game writing in general and being a freelancer. And the arrogance part is about being a freelancer, like really asking for the rates that you are worth, like not being paid only half the amount because you just have to get this job to survive, or you think you are not worth enough. So this kind of arrogance is something that you have to learn as a freelancer just to survive and know your worth. So I think that's part of becoming an adult. And if you don't do this early on, you have to learn it later, because otherwise you will still work for scraps, and no one wants that. I mean, I've been doing things not exactly for exposure, but I have been doing work for indie studios where, these people don't make any money themselves yet. It may turn out to be a successful game and then they make money, but they pay themselves almost nothing, just barely able to survive. So I can't ask for a huge amount of money for any job that I do with them. Like, if Electronic Arts knocks on my door, or Ubisoft, I will of course attach my usual rate and not go down from there. But with a small indie studio, I'm in this adventure scene. If there are people who work for years alone on some adventure, and if they ask for my help, I am willing to go down a little. The only thing is, I can't do this every time, of course, because then I won't be able to survive myself. Mm-hmm. So I have to be careful in this regard. Enthusiasm and nice-looking games are great to work on, and you do it for the love of the genre, but you can't live by love alone in the end.
So you've worked on lots of games. You were a writer and level designer for games on Game Boy Color. You worked on the Leisure Suit Larry games, a couple of them anyway. I think most recently, as far as a game that's actually shipped already, you were a story consultant and writer for Atlas Fallen, and you've got Monolith coming out very soon. Actually, I'll start with Atlas Fallen. Will you tell us what 80s movie quote you have hidden in that game?
Yeah, that's something. Working on these two Leisure Suit Larry games, just to clarify, not the old games. Those were titles that were released in 2018 and 2020, developed by a German developer called Crazy Bunch in Hamburg. Those games were full of pop culture references, like, of course, the classics, but also new ones. Now, Atlas Fallen is a unique fantasy world, a game developed by Deck 13 in Frankfurt. And it is not a comedy game in any regard. It has a few side quests that are meant to be funny, but it's not like the dialogue is laugh out loud all the time. But there is one scene, I'm only telling that much. It's happening in a well, and there is one line is a direct quote from the movie The Goonies, one of my favorite 80s movies growing up. Okay. But I'm not telling which line that is. And it's just a throwaway line. that fits perfectly into the existing dialogue in the game. Like, it's not, look, this is a quote from somewhere. This is such a unique or strange line without any context. No, it is just that one line that fits in the context of the actual game dialogue. So you really, really have to know what you're looking for. And there is one disclaimer I have to add. It may have happened that during the speech recordings that this line may have been altered or even cut. I have not yet played that scene in the final release version, so I can't even be sure if it's really in there. But I did my best.
So Leisure Suit Larry is a good example because, as you say, lots of pop culture references there. I think I've brought this up on the podcast before, but I'm so interested when it comes to translation and localization, when it comes to things like idioms and rhyming and stuff like that. Like, how do you do that? How do you take it from one language and make it make sense in another?
Yeah, that's a big topic. Of course, a good translation is always an adaptation. Like, you take the essence of that line or that scene or that joke, and you just transfer it into another culture, into another language. So I think the best approach always is to have enough courage to stray away from the original text. Do not stick too close to the original joke, to the original text. Find other ways to transport the same sentiment in your language, in your culture. And I have one example where it was really hard. Many years ago, I worked on the German translation of one of the Sam and Max adventures, the ones from Telltale. They did 3 seasons, and I worked only on the second season. And in this season, there is a robot, like a Transformer robot, and he only talks in lyrics from songs. So every line from this robot is some lyric text from some song. And of course, if I translate these lyrics into German, literally, no one realizes that these are song lyrics, because of course the song has never been translated into German. So we altered the context of this robot. There was a line where he explains himself why he talks this way. So in German, we made something out of this, like, he can only communicate with German pop songs. And then I was really only reading German song texts from a certain area of Germany to find quotes in these songs, lines that fit to the context of the game scene. So we can still say, yeah, this robot only talks in German song lyrics from this era. And that was tough. But it was also a lot of fun because we were able to integrate some of the more famous German song lines that many people know, which was the idea in the original. But yeah, it took a lot of time, and if you're paid by the word count that you have, that's way too much work for this sum you're paid.
Right. You interned for Bamako, I might be mispronouncing that, Bamako Entertainment in the 90s in the marketing department, and that was when you said you got your first taste of game dev and localization. Being in the marketing department, like, how were you able to glean from that? Like, what were you doing, and how did you absorb that knowledge?
Yeah, the idea was simply that was a company based in Frankfurt, and I studied not perhaps an hour away from Frankfurt, and I thought, well, why not do an internship at this company? And they were just a distributor, so they really manufactured and distributed the boxes with the games, but they also started doing a bit of publishing on the side. So I knew I couldn't work creatively on the games, but I thought it was a good way to get into the business in general. So what I did was write press releases, talk to journalists, supply them with the material they need and stuff like that. And that was for 3 months in the summer during courses of university. And in fact, I got in touch with people that I still work with today, like almost 30 years later, because many of these people are still in the business and may have changed the company, of course. The Bamako does not exist anymore, but they are still in the industry. So for me, that was just a way to get in touch with people working on games, but I always knew I wanted to work on the games themselves. So I really used this to get in touch with the dev scene in Frankfurt, and then found this small company working on Game Boy titles, and they were looking for a level designer, to which I barely qualified, but they took a chance and hired me. But these few years writing press releases and working on marketing games and then doing a bit of localization for their publishing department, that was really the best crash course in game publishing and game distribution that you could have. Because they also distributed the kind of games that I liked, and it were big titles at that point. They were the German distributor for games like Warcraft 2 or something like that. So really not just some minor things, but really big titles. And yeah, I never regretted that. It was a great way to get into the industry.
Are you sad that, because you've written some user manuals for games, are you sad that that's not really a thing anymore?
There is one part that I do not miss at all, and these are the technical requirements checklists, like not only in manuals, but also in the games themselves. Like, you have a huge Excel table with lines that you are required to be able to display in the game. Like, when you disconnect the controller from the console, there has to be a certain message on a Sony console, a certain message on the Xbox, and a certain message on a Nintendo console. And it has to be exactly phrased like they want you to. But it's not like you could take this Excel sheet and integrate it into every game. No, it has to be adapted to every game and every language. I hated that. That was terrible. But and many of these things, like the end user license agreements and stuff like that, they have to be translated too, at least for lawyers to just to finalize them in the end. But that's the part that I hated. But not being able to write the big manuals with big storylines and stuff like that. I missed that. Yeah, I was really, that was one of the first things as a real job that I considered when I bought Elite for the Amiga, the space simulation. And you opened the box and you found a novel, I think of 40 or 50 pages from Robert Holstock, set in the Elite universe. And I thought, wow, it would be great to write something like that, like a novel or a story for a computer game to be part of this experience. I never got to do that. That's sad.
Yeah, that is we're probably just showing how old we are here, but I am quite sad that that's exactly, it was like such an art piece to have the full manual and go through it. And depending on the game, maybe you'd find a secret or whatever, but more than anything, I just want to read about the characters because you'd get extra info on them. But yeah, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I bought a game for the Amiga just a day before I went on a holiday with my parents for 2 weeks. And I couldn't take the Amiga with me, of course. So all I had was the manual of that game to read for 2 long weeks while being at the beach and dreaming of being back home and finally playing that game.
One of the things I had to bring up here, so you have 2 podcasts that I know of. One called Chapter 1. And it's about books. You interview authors, not entirely separate from gaming content, as you do have an episode on John Romero. You also have a podcast. This one makes me laugh because when I was using, my browser to translate it to English, the write-ups on it, it said it was called Use Ear with Speaker. And I didn't get it at first. And I was like, that must be a weird translation. I was going to ask you about that. And then, I don't know why, it clicked. I went, oh no, that's a brilliant name for an adventure game podcast. Use Ear with Speaker. So, well done on that name.
Yeah, I really took some time to think about that. I mean, the domain of that of that podcast is simply adventurepodcast.de. So a very general domain that was still available at that point. The book podcast has buchpodcast.de. That's also great. And I'm doing the book podcast with my friend Jochen Gebauer, who is from gamespodcast.de, the most successful German games podcast. So yeah, for the adventure podcast, I really considered some general things, but when I thought of use ear with loudspeaker, that's something like a secret language to everyone who plays adventure games. People who instantly recognize this as an adventure instruction. They will know what this podcast is about. So I hired a graphic artist and asked him to draw a loudspeaker, like pulsating with a high volume and blasting out some typical adventure objects, like the classic mine lamp, of course, a red herring, and he did a great job, and I think it's instantly recognizable.
Now, since I don't speak German or understand German, I couldn't listen, unfortunately. Can you give us a quick version of what do you do on these podcasts?
Yeah, my idea was the first decision was to do it in German because there already is an English adventure game podcast out there. He's pumping out episodes all the time, and he's doing a great job. So that market is satisfied. But there is no adventure game podcast in German. And as we all know from Tim Schafer, Germany is Adventureland. There are still many people who play adventures over here, and many German developers still work in the genre. So the idea was to talk about adventure games. Every episode is about one game, ideally, but it's modern adventures. It's not a retro podcast about the classics like Monkey Island and all the Sierra titles, but really games. For me, the cutoff point is the year 2000. The newer, the better. So the last episode that I did was about the game Beyond the Edge of Owlsguard. And that was a one-person project from a guy from Germany who worked 7 years on this pixelated fantasy adventure. So the idea is I have a guest, and I talk with this guest about the game, and ideally I have an interview with a person or the persons behind the game. In this case, I did a 40-minute interview with Hans, the developer. And if I talk about games that are not from Germany, I still try to implement a few audio snippets from the developers. For example, I did an episode about Lucid Dreaming from a British developer, and he was kind enough to chat with me and provide a few audio samples about the making of his game. So there are a few minutes of English content in these episodes, but it's I refrain from doing extensive interviews in English because I think the listeners will all be Germans, of course. So it's nicer to it's nice to hear the people behind the game as they sound, but it's best not to make like 10 or 20 minutes in English, just in English.
Right. Have you ever written, I don't know if there'd be a different term for this in Germany, but have you ever written a choose your own adventure book? Because that seems like the perfect crossroads for you.
I just had talks with a German publisher about something like that because they did a choose your own adventure book, and it was rather successful, but not successful enough to grant new books in. So they decided to cancel the whole thing in the end. But it's essentially what I try to do on the Commodore 64 myself, but it's just branching storylines in the end. Print is not the perfect tool for branching storylines, of course, because you can't use any variables. You can't change the text. So interactive fiction, like a visual novel that is not visual, that's still something I think is very interesting. But still, you have to write a lot of text. You have to use tools for technical integration. And in the end, people, your audience still reads through this linear piece of text, and they don't know how much other text is still there that they did not read because it's in another storyline or a variant of the text that they read. So I still find this interesting, but I prefer the more interactive storylines of modern adventures, to be honest. Like I wouldn't play these modern text text adventures that are only branching storylines, or these books that are choose your own adventure things. I mean, I have worked with Twine as to mention one tool that is an easy way to get into these interactive storylines, but they are really they don't offer many ways to tell your stories. It's just a node-based storyline thing where you can do branching stories and you have variables, and that's it. So some people do really impressive things with Twine and with other engines, but it's not for me, I must say. So if I right now I prefer to either write a book, just tell the story in the way that I want it, or work on games with other people where the collaboration is also something rewarding, where you can really work together to create an interesting world.
I actually have used Twine to run a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and it's definitely useful for keeping, you can, as you say, you have branches of story. So if they decide to do this, I can kind of be prepared and have notes on it. But as Dungeons and Dragons tends to go, no matter how much I prepare, the party will choose something I totally didn't think of, and then I've made all these notes that I can't even use.
Yeah, I'm not really into role-playing games, actually. So I've never played Dungeons and Dragons or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, I played a few role-playing games on the Amiga back then or on the PC, but I never played pen and paper, really. So that's the kind of storytelling that eludes me in general.
You went to Gamescom and DevCom last month, maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Was it for work or for leisure?
I'm a freelance game writer. Everything is leisure and work. Everything is tax deductible. Oh, I'm buying a PlayStation just for tax reasons. So that's the fun thing. But I've been attending the German game fairs since they exist, essentially. Before Gamescom in Cologne, there was a smaller fair in Leipzig, the Games Convention. And that started, I think, 20 years ago was the first time. And I visited almost every year of these two conferences. And the Gamescom is preceded by 2 days of DevCom, which is the developer conference of the Gamescom. And they have some high-class speakers, and essentially the whole German development industry is there. And it feels like a class reunion by now. If you're long enough in one scene or one bubble, and you keep meeting every year at these occasions, and it's always fun to meet these people again and meet new people. And this year there was one lecture that I really wanted to attend as well. It was the Return to Monkey Island panel, where they had all the main developers from the team, like Ron Gilbert, David Fox, Rex Crowley. They were all there, and it was nice to see them on stage and listen to them. And so that's fun and work at the same time, and that works for me.
Did you buy anything cool, and did you get to meet anyone cool?
I'm not buying stuff anymore.
No.
I mean, they have one hall that is just merch for games, and no, I mean, let the kids spend their money there. I'm not doing that anymore. But yeah, I had the pleasure of talking to Dave Grossman from the Monkey Island team. He was the writer also of, I think, Day of the Tentacle and many other LucasArts games. And he was the one luminary from the LucasArts days who I hadn't met earlier. And he is a writer, and I'm a writer, and it was a joy to talk to him in real life for the first time. And somebody like David Fox, I had met him at an earlier Gamescom before, and he's also such a great guy to talk to, and it's just nice to meet these heroes of the 80s, and they turn out to be nice people in real life. That's always a pleasure.
Is it tough to kind of hide your excitement? Like, is it, I remember I met a comedian I really like once, and I literally was walking up and in my head saying, don't say something stupid like it's an honor. And of course, the first thing I said, it's an honor, and then it was just such a weird meeting. But does anything like that happen to you, or can you keep it in check?
I can keep it in check by now. Like meeting Ron Gilbert for the first time, I was really, oh God, it's Ron Gilbert. He's the one who made me who I am today. And now this year it was like, oh, Ron is here again. Hey, Ron, something like that. So, but it depends. I mean, if I would meet Stephen King or something like that, I think I would go all fanboy on him. But in most cases, I mean, I have experienced people going all fanboy on me by now because I've been working on games that other people revere. So that feels even stranger, but it also it also keeps you down to earth when you're in the fan position.
What is the fantastic library Wetzlar, and how did it help you?
Oh, that's also a huge topic. Where do I start? there is a public library in a small German town called Wetzlar. That is not that far away from me from here. So if you traveled from Frankfurt to the north for about an hour, you would come to Gießen, and right next to Gießen is Wetzlar. Now, there is a writer and translator who founded a small public library just for science fiction, fantasy, and horror. That was in the 80s. And this thing kept growing and growing and growing, and is now the biggest public library in the world for science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And they were doing writing courses just when I attended university, and my university worked with them. So I came to Wetzlar and did a writing course there, and it also propelled my career a bit. I started publishing a few short stories with that library. I still do to this day, and I'm really good friends with the people at that library. But it's not something that is very well known in the rest of the world, I guess. So everyone in Wetzlar knows about this library, of course, and they do a conference every year, but it's a rather small conference for a select group of people. So they are very well known in the German scene of fantasy literature, and they can claim to be the biggest library of their kind in the world, but yeah, I think the company called Leica, they do cameras for many Xiaomi handies and many other smartphones. And they are, I think, the brand from Wetzlar that is best known in the rest of the world, not the library itself.
Last thing, I know you've got a game you worked on coming out right away, Monolith. Correct me if I'm wrong, but let us know about this game. Why should we check it out? Who should check it out?
For adventure game lovers, they may remember the Secret Files Tunguska series from, I think it was 10 to 15 years ago. They were rather well known and well regarded. And Animation Arts, the company behind these games, announced an adventure called Monolith in 2010. And then nothing ever happened, and the game was never released. But a few years ago, I think, they rebooted development of this game, and now it is really on the home stretch of development. And in, I think, the spring, I got a call if I was interested in working on the text for this game, or rewriting the text, optimizing the storyline a bit. And it's a very classic point-and-click adventure in a 3D rendered world. It's about a astronaut called Tessa Carter. She crash lands on an alien planet. The ship does not work anymore. Her friend has gone missing. So with the only company of a small flying robot, they have to find a way off this planet and and try to repair the ship. They find a settlement, an old mining colony, and they have to solve a lot of puzzles, of course. And there is a secret that I can't divulge here right now about this planet that Tessa finds out during the course of her adventure. And it's coming out this October. And I'm looking forward to its release myself. But as I said, I was only hired to work on story and text, so it's not my game. Like, I did not invent the whole thing. I just helped to get it to the finish line.
I think that counts.
Yeah, I feel emotionally attached to the whole game and the characters, yes, because I spent weeks with these in this world, of course. But it's something different than I made everything up.
Right.
And let me point you to another game that I'm currently working on right now. Actually, it's an RPG called Drover. It's also developed by a company called Chist 2D and published by Deck 13, who did Atlas Fallen. And it's a pixel RPG in a very dark fantasy world. And it's got a lot of NPCs. It's got a lot of text, and it's very interesting to write because Monolith is such it tries to have this science fiction, this sense of wonder being on another planet, and Drover plays in another world that is very dark and dirty, like the grimdark fantasy that you may know of. And it feels completely different to write, but it's also a lot of fun.
Awesome. I look forward to both of them. People can check out your work at falkoloeffler.de. That's FALKOLOEFFLER.de. Falko Loeffler, pardon me. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, Thanks for having me.